Happy spooky season. This is day 2 of 31 of my spooky readings. Today's book is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This book is an exploration into a murderous haunted house that broaches on issues of trans rights, TERFs, and the increasing violence against minority communities. Alice, Ela, and their friend Hannah spent a night alone in a haunted house 3 years ago. Hannah didn't make it out of the house alive. The surviving women are haunted by their experiences, including some experiences that indicate that each was sexually assaulted by the other while they were in the house. The premise of this book is encapsulated in this quote: "Every spot on the planet has something in the past that is worth haunting about. Or if miraculously it does not, then there is always the future, which holds far worse for everyone. It haunts backwards." So when we meet Alice, she's being haunted through a poster. A being that appears to be connected to the house is able to torment her by crawling out of the poster. Even though she's no longer in the house, she's connected to it, and it seems to be able to reach out to her even from a distance. It wasn't clear to me if the house is angry that she's a woman, that she's trans, or if it's because she actually showed up to the house. Although the house does seem to have a habit to calling people to it, so that doesn't seem to be the issue. But after her experience, she's just trying to move on with her life and figure out what to do. And she says, "I don't want to hide all the bad things away beneath my bed like a kid asked to tidy his room, like the British Empire." And there's so many of these great reflections towards history and these big complex ideas of how the world is very complicated and history isn't linear, and how a lot of times the things that are done in our names are hidden. So Ila takes a whole different turn on this front and becomes a TERF because she believes Alice raped her in the room. And she talks about this experience at a TERF meeting, and afterwards ends up nearly assaulted by a woman who's just higher up than her on the power hierarchy. This book spends a lot of time looking at issues of power and race and sexuality and gender identity, and the way that our privilege impacts us, and the calculus that determines where we fall into that equation and how it shifts based on the moment itself, and how all of this in some ways can loops back to fascism, and the way that fascism's trying to just make us afraid of all of these groups. And they say fascism, like desire, is scattered everywhere in separate bits and pieces within the whole social realm. It crystallizes in one place or another depending upon the relationship of force. It can be said of fascism that it is all powerful and at the same time ridiculously weak. And you see this play out in the book in so many ways. The way that people try to prevent Ela from even getting into this TERF meeting because there's outdoor protests. There's a parade bombing that happens at some point, and we just see a lot of very intentional moments of fascism popping up and making it so really nobody is safe. And yet anytime somebody comes out and stands up against it, it almost crumbles beneath the pressure. Ultimately, the girls meet up at a party and decide they're going to go back to the house to try to take back their power. They want to resolve the issue. Um, they have to encounter Hannah and face what happened to them between in their first trip, and the betrayal that brought them back to the house, and what to do with it with themselves if they survive the night. They say the most famous haunted places in the world tend to be big houses and castles because rich people lived in them and collected blood on their hands. The collective violence that caused everybody else in the world manifests into ghosts. Ghosts are born from trauma and violence. And the house very much has a way of increasing trauma and violence to develop more ghosts. This book does such an amazing job of bringing out the reality of what happens when you're racked with grief and trauma and the cycles that might cause you to continue to stay in that cycle. As this quote suggests, the world outside is dark and unknowable. In the room, you are safe. You are subject to violence, abuse, mistreatment, hurt, pain, all of the above, but you are safe from what is outside the room, and that is what matters. Inside the room is the pain you know. Outside the room is the pain you don't know. It's not a hard choice to make in the end. And a lot of people do choose to stay with the pain they know because the risk of leaving that and going out into the world of another type of pain is just unconscionable. In the end, the girls are forced to confront what happens when hate causes you to destroy someone you thought you loved, and whether you can come back from that. This book has stayed with me in the days since I've read it, causing me to think deeply about these issues. This book explores trans horror issues deeply, from what might drive someone to be a TERF to what happens when you're out in the world and don't exactly pass. I rate this book a 4 out of 5 and recommend it to anybody who's interested in some queer horror this spooky season. And a big thank you to my library for giving me access to this book.